I'm not going to speak to that.
Your team interviewed Christopher Steele, is that correct?
Not going to get into that.
You can't tell this committee as to whether or not you interviewed Christopher Steele in a 22-month investigation with 18 lawyers.
As I said at the outset, that is one of the investigations that is being handled by others in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, but you're here testifying about this investigation today. And I am asking you directly, did any members of your team or did you interview Christopher Steele in the course of your investigation?
And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
You had 2 years to investigate. Not once did you consider it worthy to investigate how an unverified document that was paid for by a political opponent was used to obtain a warrant to spy on the opposition political campaign. Did you do any investigation in that whatsoever?
I do not accept your characterization of what occurred.
What would be your characterization?
I'm not going to speak any more to it.
So you can't speak any more to it, but you're not going to agree with my characterization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Mueller, rather than purely relying on the evidence provided by witnesses and documents, I think you relied a lot on media. I'd like to know how many times you cited the Washington Post in your report.
How many times I what?
Cited the Washington Post in your report.
I do not have knowledge of that figure, but that's it. I don't have knowledge of that figure.
I counted about 60 times. How many times did you cite the New York Times? I counted.
Again, I have no idea.
I counted about 75 times. How many times did you cite Fox News?
As with the other two, I have no idea.
About 25 times. I've got to say, it looks like Volume 2 is mostly regurgitated press stories. Honestly, there's almost nothing in Volume 2 that I couldn't already hear or know simply by having a $50 cable news subscription. However, your investigation cost the American taxpayers $25 million. Mr. Mueller, you cited media reports nearly 200 times in your report. Then in a footnote, a small footnote, number 7, page 15 of volume 2 of your report, you wrote, I quote, "This section summarizes and cites various news stories not for the truth of the information contained in the stories, but rather to place candidate Trump's response to those stories in context. Since nobody but lawyers reads footnotes, are you concerned that the American public took the embedded news stories?"
Time of the gentlelady is expired. The gentlelady from Washington.
Can Mr. Mueller answer the question?
No, we're running short on time.
Given your 22 months of investigation, tens of millions of dollars spent, and millions of documents reviewed, did you obtain any evidence at all that any American voter changed their vote as a result of Russia's election interference?
I'm not going to speak to that.
You can't speak to that? After 22 months of investigation, there's not any evidence in that document before us that any voter changed their vote because of their interference, and I'm asking you based on all of the documents that you reviewed.
That was outside our purview.
Russian meddling was outside your purview?
But the impact of that meddling was undertaken by other agencies.
Okay, you stated in your opening statement that you would not get into the details of the Steele dossier. However, multiple times in volume 2 on page 23, 27, and 28, you mentioned the unverified allegations. How long did it take you to reach the conclusion that it was unverified?
I'm not going to speak to that.
It's actually in your report multiple times that it's unverified, and you're telling me that you're not willing to tell us how you came to the conclusion that it was unverified.
True.
When did you become aware that the unverified Steele dossier was included in the FISA application to spy on Carter Page?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
When did you become aware that the unverified Steele dossier was included in the FISA application to spy on Carter Page?
I'm not going to speak to that.
Your team interviewed Christopher Steele, is that correct?
Not going to get into that.
You can't tell this committee as to whether or not you interviewed Christopher Steele in a 22-month investigation with 18 lawyers.
As I said at the outset, that is one of the investigations that is being handled by others in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, but you're here testifying about this investigation today. And I am asking you directly, did any members of your team or did you interview Christopher Steele in the course of your investigation?
And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
You had 2 years to investigate. Not once did you consider it worthy to investigate how an unverified document that was paid for by a political opponent was used to obtain a warrant to spy on the opposition political campaign. Did you do any investigation in that whatsoever?
I do not accept your characterization of what occurred.
What would be your characterization?
I'm not going to speak any more to it.
So you can't speak any more to it, but you're not going to agree with my characterization. Is that correct?
Yes.
The FISA application makes reference to Source One, who was Christopher Steele, the author of the Steele dossier. The FISA application says nothing Sources One's reason for conducting the research into Candidate One's ties to Russia, based on Sources One previous reporting history with FBI, whereby Source One provided reliable information to the FBI. The FBI believes Source One's reporting herein to be credible. Do you believe the FBI's representation that Source One's reporting was credible to be accurate?
I'm not going to answer that.
So you're not going to respond to any of the questions regarding Christopher Steele or your interviews with them?
Well, as I said at the outset this morning, that was one of the investigations that I could not speak to.
Well, I don't understand how, if you interviewed an individual on the purview of this investigation that you're testifying to us today, that you've closed that investigation, how that's not within your purview to tell us about that investigation and who you interviewed.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, well, I can guarantee that the American people want to know. And I'm very hopeful and glad that AG Barr is looking into this and the Inspector General is looking into this, because you're unwilling to answer the questions of the American people as it relates to the very basis of this investigation into the president and the very basis of this individual who you did interview. You're just refusing to answer those questions. Can't the president fire the FBI director at any time without reason under Article 1 of the Constitution?
Yes.
Article 2?
Yes.
That's correct. Can't he also fire you as special counsel at any time without any reason?
I believe that to be the case.
Under Article 2?
Well, hold on just a second. You said without any reason. I know that special counsel can be fired, but I'm not certain it extends to for whatever reason is given.
Well, and you've testified that you weren't fired. You were able to complete your investigation in full. Is that correct?
I'm not going to add to what I've stated before.